I didn't expect the night to change anything. That's the thing about moments like that. They don't announce themselves. They don't arrive with warning or ceremony. They just happen, quiet and sudden, and by the time you realize what's shifted, you're already standing in the middle of it, breathless, unable to go back. The court was nearly empty when I arrived. It usually was at that hour. Most people had already gone home, back to air conditioning and soft beds, and the kind of comfort I couldn't seem to settle into. I came to the court because I needed the opposite of comfort. I needed the slap of rubber on concrete, the burn in my lungs, the clean simplicity of shot arcing through humid air. Out there, under those buzzing sodium lights, everything made sense in a way my life didn't. The summer heat clung to everything that night. Even at 10 o'clock, the air felt thick, heavy, like breathing through wet fabric. My shirt stuck to my back before I'd even touched the ball. The court itself seemed to glow under the lights, that strange orange cast that made shadows longer and faces harder to read. Beyond the chain-link fence, the neighborhood was quiet. A few cars passed on the distant street. Someone's television flickered blue through a window. But here in this circle of light, it was just me and the rhythm I'd come to depend on. I was halfway through a layup drill when I heard the gate creak open behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Caleb had a way of moving that announced him, even when he was trying to be quiet, all loose-limbed confidence, like he owned whatever space he entered. The slap of his sneakers on the concrete confirmed it. I caught the ball and turned, wiping sweat from my forehead with the hem of my shirt. He was grinning already, that sharp, competitive grin that had defined most of our friendship. He didn't say hello. He just raised his eyebrows, a silent challenge, and I tossed him a ball without a word. This was our language. This was how we talked when words felt too complicated. We've been doing this for years, ever since freshman year of college, when we'd ended up as roommates and discovered we were both the kind of restless that needed motion to think clearly. We'd spent countless nights like this, playing until our legs shook, until every shot felt like a prayer or a curse, until the only sounds left were breathing and the bounce of the ball. It was competition, sure, but it was also something else. Out here, we didn't have to explain ourselves. We didn't have to perform or pretend. We just played. That night started like all the others. Caleb drove to the basket. I blocked. I went for a three-pointer. He contested. We fell into the familiar rhythm, trading baskets and insults, our bodies moving in patterns we'd memorized without meaning to. He was faster than me, but I was steadier. He took wild risks. I calculated angles. We balanced each other in a way that felt effortless, inevitable. But then something changed. I caught a rebound and turned, already planning my next move, when Caleb suddenly stepped in front of me. Not to block, not exactly. He moved into my space with purpose, his hand coming up to press the ball hard against my chest. It wasn't a foul. It wasn't even aggressive. It was something else entirely, a stopping point, a statement I didn't understand yet. I froze. My breath caught somewhere between my lungs and my throat. The ball was trapped between us, his palm flat against it, the pressure steady and deliberate. I waited for him to step back, to laugh it off, to turn it into another joke or challenge. That's what Caleb did. He pushed boundaries and then retreated behind humor before anything got too serious. But he didn't step back. His hand stayed where it was, the ball pressed firm against my sternum. I could feel the heat of his palm through the leather, could feel my own heartbeat hammering against it like it was trying to reach him. The space between us was so small I could see the sweat on his collarbone, could count the breaths moving through his chest. His eyes met mine, dark and unreadable in the strange orange light, and something in his expression made my stomach drop. This wasn't the game anymore. This was something neither of us had named yet, something that had been building in the spaces between our competitions, in the silences after our laughter died down, in every moment when standing close felt more dangerous than any contact. The court lights buzzed overhead, a steady electric hum that filled the silence. Somewhere beyond the fence, a dog barked once and fell quiet. The night pressed in around us, heavy and expectant, and I realized with sudden clarity that we were alone in a way we'd never been before. Not just physically alone, but alone in a moment that demanded something from us, something I wasn't sure I was ready to give. Caleb's jaw tightened. I watched a muscle jump beneath his skin, watched him swallow hard. His fingers curled slightly against the ball, pressing it deeper into my chest, and I understood then that this wasn't casual. This wasn't an accident. He was choosing to stay in this space, choosing not to retreat, and he was waiting to see what I would do. My mind raced through every moment that had led us here. Every late-night game that stretched past midnight. Every time his hand lingered on my shoulder after a good play. Every joke that fell flat because it carried too much weight beneath it. Every silence that felt fuller than conversation. They stacked up in my memory like evidence of something I'd been too afraid to examine closely. I should have stepped back. I should have laughed, shoved him away, broken whatever this tension was before it solidified into something we couldn't ignore. That would have been the safe choice. That would have kept everything familiar and uncomplicated. But I didn't move. I stood there with the ball pressed against my chest and Caleb's hand holding it in place, and I felt the exact moment when our friendship crossed into territory we'd never mapped before. It was terrifying and inevitable in equal measure. It was everything changing and nothing changing at all, because maybe this had always been there waiting beneath the surface of every game we'd played. The air between us felt charged, electric in a way that had nothing to do with the buzzing lights overhead. My whole body was aware of him. The rise and fall of his breathing, the smell of sweat and summer heat, the way his eyes searched my face like he was looking for permission or warning, or maybe both at once. The game had stopped. The ball hung motionless between us. And in that suspended moment, I understood that what happened next would determine everything. I've always been the steady one, the one who showed up on time, turned in assignments early, kept my dorm room organized while Caleb's side looked like a hurricane had passed through. My life had a rhythm to it, predictable and safe, and I'd built it that way deliberately. After growing up in a house where emotions ran hot and loud, where my parents' arguments shook the walls and silence meant someone was about to explode, I'd learned to crave calm. I'd learned to keep things controlled. College was supposed to be more of that. For years to study engineering, get decent grades, maybe make a few friends, then graduate into a quiet, respectable life. I wasn't looking for drama or chaos or anything that might tip my carefully balanced world off its axis. I was 22 and content with invisible, with being the guy people forgot was in the room until they needed something fixed or explained. The basketball court was the only place I let that control slip. Late at night, when the campus had emptied and the world felt smaller, I could come here and just move. I didn't have to think or plan or measure my words. I could just play until my muscles burned and my thoughts finally went quiet. It was meditation, in its way, the only kind I'd ever been able to manage. Then there was Caleb. We'd been randomly assigned as roommates freshman year, and I'd known within 5 minutes that we were completely wrong for each other. He was loud where I was quiet, reckless where I was careful, the kind of person who filled every room he entered with his presence. He threw parties on weeknights, forgot about exams until the day before, charmed his way out of consequences I would have been buried under. He was everything I wasn't, everything I'd specifically structured my life to avoid, except somehow we worked. Maybe it was because we both needed the court. He'd show up 11 at night, restless and burning with energy he couldn't contain, and we'd play until 2 in the morning without saying much of anything that mattered. The basketball was our shared language, the only place where his chaos and my control found a balance. Out there, under those humming lights, we made sense to each other in a way we never quite managed anywhere else. He was 23 now, a year older, supposed to have graduated already, but taking an extra semester because he'd switched majors twice and still wasn't sure what he wanted. That uncertainty lived in him like a constant hum, driving him to try everything, commit to nothing, keep moving so he never had to stand still long enough to figure out what he was running from. I'd watched him date half the campus over the past few years. Girls mostly, a few guys. He approached relationships the same way he approached everything else, with intensity and charm and a smile that promised more than he could deliver. They never lasted long. He'd get bored or scared or both, and he'd retreat back to what was safe. Back to late-night games with me, back to trash talk and competition, back to the one connection he'd never quite managed to sabotage. Our friendship was built on challenge. Every conversation was a debate, every game a war, every silence a test of who would break first. We pushed each other constantly, neither willing to give ground, both needing the resistance to feel real. I was the only person who didn't let him win, just because of his smile. He was the only person who bothered to look past my walls and push anyway. But underneath all that competition, underneath the insults and the games and the stubborn refusal to admit when we were wrong, there was something else. Something neither of us had named or acknowledged, but that lived in the spaces between our words. It was there in the way he always chose to spend his late nights with me instead of at parties. It was there in the way I found myself waiting for the sound of the gate creaking open, the slap of his sneakers announcing his arrival. It was there in every moment when standing too close felt more charged than any game we played. I told myself it was just friendship, that the way my chest tightened when he smiled at me was normal, that the strange possessiveness I felt when he talked about his latest date was just protectiveness, that lying awake listening to him breathe in the bed across from mine was simply insomnia. I was good at lying to myself. I'd had years of practice. But that moment on the court, with the ball pressed against my chest and his hand refusing to move away, had cracked something open. It had pulled back the curtain on what we'd both been pretending not to see. And now, standing there with the game suspended and the night holding its breath around us, I couldn't pretend anymore. Caleb had always been my closest friend and my fiercest rival. But maybe rivalry was just another word for the kind of attention that bordered on obsession. Maybe competition was just a safer way to touch each other without admitting what we were really doing. Maybe we'd been playing the wrong game all along. Eventually, I stepped back. The ball dropped between us, bouncing once before rolling away across the concrete. Caleb let it go. Neither of us moved to retrieve it. We just stood there in the orange glow, breathing hard like we'd been running sprints, though we'd barely been playing at all. He rubbed the back of his neck, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he couldn't figure out how to say. Then he laughed, short and rough, and the sound broke whatever spell had held us frozen. He turned away, walking to the fence, gripping the chain link with both hands like he needed something solid to hold on to. I should have left. I should have grabbed my bag and walked back to the dorm and let the moment dissolve into something we could both pretend hadn't happened. That's what I was good at. Walking away before things got complicated, keeping my life clean and controlled. But my feet wouldn't move. My body refused to cooperate with the part of my brain that was screaming at me to run. So I stayed. And the next night, I came back to the court. I told myself I was just maintaining my routine, that the court was mine first, that I wasn't going to let one weird moment chase me away from the one place I felt clear-headed. I told myself a lot of things that night, warming up alone under the lights, trying to find the rhythm I'd always relied on. But every sound made me turn toward the gate. Every shadow made my heart jump. When Caleb finally showed up, 20 minutes later than usual, he acted like nothing had changed. He jogged onto the court with that same easy confidence, that same sharp grin, already talking trash before he'd even touched the ball. He stole it from my hands mid-dribble, drove hard to the basket, made the shot, then turned to me with his arms spread wide in mock victory. "Want to actually try tonight?" he said, still grinning. "Or are you planning to just stand there looking pretty?" I shoved him harder than necessary, and we fell back into it. The game, the rhythm, the familiar push and pull of our competition. He played harder than usual, more aggressive, taking wild shots and driving the lane like he had something to prove. I matched him, determined not to give any ground, not to show that anything inside me had shifted. But I felt it, the difference. It lived in every moment our bodies came close, in every brush of his hand against mine when we fought for the ball, in every second when his eyes met mine and held just a fraction too long. The game continued, but underneath it, something else was happening. A conversation we were having without words, a test neither of us knew how to pass or fail. During a water break, I sat on the bench, catching my breath while Caleb paced back and forth, unable to be still. He tossed the ball from hand to hand, that restless energy radiating off him in waves. Then he stopped in front of me, closer than he needed to be, and tossed the ball lazily in my direction. I caught it, looking up at him, and he stepped closer still. Close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. His hand came up, ostensibly reaching for the ball, but instead his fingertips brushed against my chest, right where the ball had pressed the night before. The touch was light, almost accidental, but the intention behind it was anything but. "Getting tired?" he asked, and his voice had gone softer, uncertain in a way Caleb's voice never was. My chest ached under that light pressure. My whole body ached with the effort of sitting still, of not moving toward him or away, of existing in this terrible in-between space where everything and nothing was happening at once. "No," I said, and my own voice came out rough. "Are you?" His smile faltered at the edges. His fingers pressed slightly harder, no longer pretending to reach for the ball. We both knew what he was doing. We both knew this wasn't about exhaustion or competition or any of the safe things we'd always hidden behind. He was testing something. Testing how close he could stand, how much contact he could make, how far he could push before I rejected him. He was daring me to acknowledge what was happening between us, while also giving himself room to retreat, to laugh it off, and pretend it was all just part of the game if I pushed him away. The smart thing would have been to stand up, to put distance between us, to reset the boundaries we'd always maintained. The safe thing would have been to make a joke, to defuse the tension, to pretend I didn't understand what he was really asking. But I didn't do either of those things. I stayed exactly where I was, sitting on that bench with his hand against my chest and his eyes searching my face for an answer I wasn't sure I knew how to give. I stayed in that unbearable moment, letting him test the weight of what we were becoming, letting myself feel the terror and want of it in equal measure. And when he finally stepped back, it felt like loss. The games changed after that, subtly at first, then undeniably. We still played with the same intensity, still traded insults and contested every shot, still kept score in our heads, even when we pretended not to care. But the real game had shifted to something else entirely. Something that lived in the moments between plays, in the silences that stretched too long, in every point of contact that wasn't quite necessary, but neither of us moved to avoid. Caleb started finding excuses to get close. When I made a shot, he'd chest bump me in celebration, his hands gripping my shoulders just a second longer than the gesture required. When I drove to the basket, he'd defend tighter than he needed to, his body pressed against mine, his breath hot against my neck. During breaks, he'd lean over me while I sat catching my breath, his arm braced against the fence behind my head, trapping me in the small space between his body and the chain link. It was deliberate, all of it. He was pushing boundaries the way he always did, except this time it wasn't about the game. This time it was about us, about testing how much I'd allow, how long I'd let him linger before I pushed him away. The problem was I never pushed him away. I told myself I was just matching his energy, not backing down from whatever challenge he was throwing at me. But that was another lie in a growing collection of them. The truth was simpler and more terrifying. I didn't want him to stop. I wanted him to keep pushing, keep testing, keep finding reasons to close the distance between us until there was no distance left at all. My body had stopped listening to the careful logic I'd always relied on. Every time he touched me, even casually, my skin felt electrified. Every time he looked at me with that uncertain, searching expression, my heart kicked against my ribs like it was trying to escape. I lay awake at night in our dorm room, listening to him breathe across the dark space between our beds, and wondered if he was awake too, if he was thinking about the same things I was, if this wanting was eating him alive the way it was eating me. One night, about a week after that first charged moment, everything nearly broke open. We'd been playing for over an hour, both of us pushing harder than usual, neither willing to give ground. The air was thick with humidity, threatening rain that hadn't arrived yet. Sweat soaked through my shirt, dripping down my spine, making every movement feel heavier. But I couldn't stop. Neither could Caleb. We were locked in something that had stopped being about basketball entirely. I went up for a shot, and Caleb contested it, his hand smacking the ball away at the last second. It ricocheted off the backboard, and I lunged for the rebound, but he was faster. He caught it mid-air and landed hard, already pivoting away from me. I didn't think. I just reacted, diving forward to block him, my arms coming up to trap the ball. But I misjudged the distance, came in too close, too fast. We collided hard, all momentum and no control, and suddenly we were falling. We hit the concrete together, tangled up, the ball bouncing away forgotten. The impact knocked the air from my lungs. For a second I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the solid weight of him on top of me, his chest heaving against mine, his face inches from my own. He pushed up on his hands, holding himself above me, but not moving away. His eyes were wide, darker than I'd ever seen them, and for a long moment we just stared at each other. I could feel his heart hammering. Or maybe it was mine. Maybe it was both, beating in panicked synchronization. "Are you okay?" he asked, and his voice came out ragged. I nodded, unable to speak. My hands had somehow ended up on his sides, gripping his shirt, and I couldn't make myself let go. The concrete was hard and hot beneath my back, but all I could focus on was the weight of him, the closeness, the way his breath came fast and shallow. "This isn't the game anymore," I whispered, finally finding words, though they came out broken. His expression shifted. The uncertainty fell away, replaced by something raw and honest that I'd never seen him wear so openly. His arms were trembling from holding himself up, or maybe from something else entirely. "I know," he said quietly. Those two words hung between us, heavy with admission, with surrender, with the acknowledgement that whatever we'd been pretending, whatever excuses we'd been making, were dissolving into something neither of us could deny anymore. He still didn't move. I still didn't let go of his shirt. We stayed suspended in that moment, sprawled on the basketball court under buzzing lights, our bodies pressed together, both of us terrified and certain in equal measure. The first drops of rain began to fall, warm and slow, but neither of us noticed. We were too busy finally seeing each other clearly, too busy standing at the edge of something that would change everything, too busy not moving away. Eventually, the rain forced us apart. It came down harder, turning from scattered drops to a steady downpour that soaked through our clothes and made the court slick beneath our feet. Caleb pushed himself up, offered me his hand, and pulled me to standing. We grabbed our bags and ran for cover under the metal awning by the equipment shed, water streaming down our faces, our shirts clinging to our skin. We stood there, catching our breath, watching the rain blur the court into something abstract and unreal. The lights created halos in the downpour, and the chain-link fence seemed to shimmer. Neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us, full of everything we weren't saying, weighted with the admission we'd just made and didn't know how to carry forward. After a while, Caleb sat down with his back against the shed wall, his knees pulled up, his arms resting on them. I sat beside him, close enough that our shoulders touched, and he didn't move away. We watched the storm together, and for once, the silence between us didn't feel like a challenge. It felt like something else, something almost like peace, except for the way my heart wouldn't slow down, the way every breath felt deliberate. The rain continued for 20 minutes. When it finally stopped, we walked back to the dorm together without discussing it, our shoes squelching on wet pavement, our clothes dripping. In our room, we changed into dry clothes in the careful dance we'd perfected over 3 years of sharing space, turning away, pretending not to look, maintaining the boundaries we'd always kept. Except now those boundaries felt absurd, laughable. We'd been pressed together on the basketball court, our hearts beating against each other, and now we were pretending that turning our backs while we changed meant something. I climbed into bed and lay there in the dark, listening to the familiar sounds of him settling into his own bed across the room. I thought he'd fall asleep quickly the way he usually did, but I could tell from his breathing that he was awake. Just lying there, thinking. I waited. For what? I didn't know. For him to say something, maybe, for the morning to come and reset everything. For my heartbeat to slow down to something normal. Instead, after what felt like hours, I heard myself speak into the darkness. "Why do you keep doing that?" "Doing what?" His voice was quiet, careful, pressing in, getting close like you're daring me to push you away. The silence that followed was so long, I thought maybe he decided not to answer. Maybe he'd pretend to be asleep, and in the morning we'd both pretend this conversation hadn't happened. That would be easier, safer, more like the people we'd always been with each other. But then I heard him shift in his bed, heard the rustle of sheets, and when he spoke again, his voice was different. Stripped of its usual confidence, raw in a way I'd never heard from him before. Because if I move back, I'm afraid I won't come close again. The words landed in the dark room like a confession, like something he'd been carrying for so long that finally releasing it left him emptied out. My throat tightened. My chest ached with the weight of what he'd just admitted, with the vulnerability he'd handed me. Caleb, who never let anyone see beneath his surface, who hid behind charm and bravado and constant motion, had just told me the truth. The real truth, not the version he showed the world. How long? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. How long what? How long have you been afraid to move back? Another long silence. Then, I don't know. A while. Maybe always. I closed my eyes against the darkness. All this time, we've been circling each other, testing boundaries, finding excuses to touch, pretending our friendship was just friendship when it had been so much more. All this time, he'd been scared of the same thing I was, that acknowledging what we felt would destroy what we had, that moving toward each other meant risking everything, that wanting this badly was dangerous. But the thing about fear is that it doesn't protect you. It just keeps you frozen, standing at the edge of something real, never letting yourself fall. I'm not going to push you away, I said into the darkness. I heard him draw in a sharp breath, heard him hold it. The space between our beds felt enormous and insignificant at the same time. 3 years we'd maintained that distance. 3 years of careful boundaries and unspoken rules. And now, with just a few words, those boundaries were dissolving. Jonah, he said, and my name in his mouth sounded different than it ever had before. Uncertain and hopeful and terrified. I'm not going to push you away, I repeated, firmer this time. So stop testing. Stop daring me. I didn't finish the sentence because I didn't know how. Just what? Just admit he wanted this? Just close the distance? Just stop being afraid? Just stay close, I finally said. You don't have to keep proving something I already know. The silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. It was full of understanding, of acceptance, of a door opening that neither of us could close again, even if we wanted to. We'd finally stopped playing the wrong game. The next night, we both showed up at the court without discussing it. Some routines ran too deep to break, even when everything else was changing. The air was clear after the rain, cooler than it had been in weeks, and the concrete still held dark patches where water had pooled and not quite dried. Caleb arrived a few minutes after me. He walked on the court slower than usual. No joking entrance, no immediate trash talk. He just picked up the ball where I'd left it and stood there holding it, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. We played, but it was different. Gentler, somehow, though no less intense. He still defended hard, still contested my shots, still drove to the basket with that reckless confidence. But the aggression had softened into something else. When we collided now, fighting for a rebound, he didn't immediately pull away. When his hand brushed mine, he let it linger. When our eyes met, he didn't hide behind his usual grin. We were done pretending, done testing. Whatever we'd been building toward for months or years had finally been named, and now we were just trying to figure out what came next. After about an hour, I missed a shot badly, the ball clanging off the rim and bouncing toward the fence. Caleb caught on the rebound and turned back toward me, that familiar competitive gleam in his eyes. But instead of going for the basket, he walked straight to where I stood in the key, the ball held loosely in his hands. He stopped close, too close, close enough that I had to tilt my head slightly to maintain eye contact. And then, deliberately, he pressed the ball against my chest. Not hard like that first time, not aggressive or challenging. Just steady, certain. His hand flat against the leather, the pressure gentle but unmistakable. My breath caught. This was the gesture that had started everything, the moment that had cracked open what we'd both been hiding. But now it meant something different. Now it wasn't a test or a dare. It was a question. It was him asking if I'd meant what I'd said in the dark the night before, if I'd really meant that I wouldn't push him away. I reached up and put my hand over his, pressing it harder against my chest so he could feel my heartbeat thundering beneath it. So he could feel that I was just as scared as he was, just as uncertain, but that I was choosing this anyway. His eyes searched mine, looking for doubt or hesitation, looking for any sign that I was doing this out of pity or curiosity or anything other than genuine want. Whatever he saw in my face must have been enough, because his expression shifted. The uncertainty fell away, replaced by something raw and open and real. I let the ball drop. It hit the concrete and rolled away forgotten. Neither of us moved to catch it. We just stood there with his hand against my chest and my hand covering his, the space between us charged with possibility. Then I stepped closer, closing what little distance remained. Close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off his body, could see the exact moment his breath hitched, could count the rapid pulse beating in his throat. My free hand came up to his waist, tentative, giving him time to pull back if he wanted to, giving us both an escape route if this was too much, too fast, too real. But he didn't pull back. He leaned in. The kiss was sudden at first, almost clumsy in its urgency, all the pent-up tension of weeks breaking at once. His hand fisted in my shirt, pulling me closer, and I gripped his waist harder, anchoring us both. It was desperate and messy and perfect, every bit of our usual competition channeled into this instead, both of us trying to win something we'd only just learned we'd been fighting for. Then it softened, slowed, became something steadier, more certain. His hand loosened its grip on my shirt and slid up to cup the back of my neck, his thumb brushing the sensitive skin there. I gentled my hold on his waist, letting my other hand drift up to his shoulder, memorizing the solid reality of him. We kissed like we had all the time in the world, like the court and the night, and the buzzing lights existed just for this, for us finally finding our way to each other. When we finally pulled apart, both of us breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against mine. His eyes were closed, his expression almost peaceful in a way I'd never seen him look before. Like he'd been holding his breath for years and could finally exhale. "Guess I finally won," he whispered, and there was laughter in his voice, but also something else. Relief, maybe, or gratitude. I shook my head, my hand still on him, not ready to let go. No, we both did. His eyes opened, meeting mine, and the smile that spread across his face was different from any smile I'd seen from him before. Not his usual sharp grin, or his charming mask, or his competitive smirk. Just genuine happiness, unguarded and whole. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Yeah, we did. That was 3 months ago." The court looks the same now as it did then. The same buzzing lights casting their orange glow, the same chain-link fence enclosing the space, the same cracks in the concrete that we've learned to dribble around without thinking. But everything else has changed. We still come here late at night, still play until our legs shake and our shirts are soaked through with sweat. The games are just as competitive, just as fierce. Caleb still talks trash, still takes wild shots, still grins when he scores. I still play steady and calculated, still block his drives, still refuse to give him any easy points. To anyone watching from outside the fence, we look exactly the same as we always have. Two friends playing basketball in the dark, their rivalry as intense as ever. But they'd miss what happens in between. They'd miss the way Caleb's hand lingers on my shoulder after a good play, no longer pretending it's just celebration. They'd miss how during water breaks, we sit closer than we used to, our legs touching, comfortable in the contact. They'd miss the looks we exchange that carry entire conversations, the silent language we've developed that goes deeper than any trash talk. And they'd definitely miss what happens when Caleb catches a rebound and turns toward me with that familiar gleam in his eyes, the ball held between us. When he steps close and presses it against my chest the way he's done dozens of times now. The gesture that's become ours. Our signal, our code, our way of saying everything we still sometimes struggle to put into words. It's not a challenge anymore. It's not a test or a dare or a question. It's an invitation. It's him telling me he wants to be close, and me being allowed to close the distance without fear or hesitation. The first time he did it after that night, we kissed. I'd frozen for just a second, some old instinct telling me to be cautious, to protect myself. But then I'd seen his expression, open and certain and unafraid, and I'd understood. This was different now. We were different now. So I'd stepped into it. Let the ball press between us. Let his hand rest against my chest. Let myself feel the wanting without shame. And then I dropped the ball, wrapped my arms around him, and kissed him right there under the lights, not caring if anyone saw, not caring about anything except the solid reality of him. We do that now. Play our game. Compete with everything we have. Push each other to be better, faster, sharper. And then, when the moment strikes, when one of us presses in with the ball or catches the other's eye in just the right way, we stop pretending the basketball is the only thing we came here for. Sometimes it's quick, a brief kiss during a water break, a hand sliding along a waist as we pass each other, fingers intertwining for just a moment before we separate to play again. Sometimes we end up pressed against the fence, the game forgotten entirely, learning each other in ways that have nothing to do with competition and everything to do with connection. Our friends have started to notice, of course, the way we disappear to the court together every night, the way we've stopped even pretending to be interested in dating other people, the way Caleb looks at me now in the dining hall or during study sessions, like a most fascinating thing in his world. Some of them have asked, carefully, if something's changed between us. We haven't made any grand announcements or put labels on anything. We've just stopped hiding. In our dorm room, we've stopped maintaining the careful distance between our beds. Most nights, Caleb falls asleep in mine, his head on my chest, his breathing slow, and even his guard finally down in a way he never allowed before. Or I drift off in his arms slung over my waist, his warmth solid against my back. We've learned to sleep tangled together, comfortable in a closeness that used to terrify us both. The control I'd built my whole life around is loosened. I've learned that letting someone in doesn't mean losing yourself. That vulnerability isn't weakness. That sometimes the scariest thing and the right thing are exactly the same. And Caleb, who spent years running from anything real, has finally stopped moving long enough to build something. He's still restless, still magnetic, still the kind of person who fills every room he enters. But now he comes back. To me. To us. To the court where everything changed. Tonight, the air is cool and clear, the kind of autumn evening that makes you grateful for the changing seasons. We've been playing for an hour, our usual intense back and forth, when Caleb steals the ball from me and turns, already laughing at his victory. But instead of going for the shot, he walks back to where I'm standing, the ball held loosely in his hands. He stops close, that familiar gesture, the ball pressing gently against my chest. His eyes meet mine, and I see everything in them. The past we've built, the present we're living, the future we're figuring out together. I don't wait for him to step back. I never do anymore, because neither of us ever does.